Let me take you somewhere quiet, just for a moment, before the storm starts again. You remember Camille Jordan, don't you? The Army lieutenant colonel who stood in court and made a crooked cop answer to the truth? Well, that wasn't the end, not even close. Because after the cameras stopped rolling and the applause faded, the system she exposed did what it always does. It regrouped. It got smarter, meaner, and this time they came for her. You're about to see what happens when a hero doesn't walk away, but walks straight into the fire. Ready? Good. Let's begin. The first wave came soft, a ripple of gratitude, handwritten notes, folded flags in the mail. Camille Jordan sat in her office at Camp Thatcher, her inbox swollen with thousands of emails from veterans, students, even strangers. You made us proud, one message read. You gave us a voice, said another. But between the thank yous, the silence broke in other ways. Letters without return addresses, typed threats in all caps. One arrived in a box. No return label, just a single bullet and a typed note. Uniforms don't make you untouchable. The army moved fast. Security was heightened. Camille's schedule was trimmed and guarded. But she kept walking the halls of Thatcher, head high, even as some fellow officers now looked twice. Longer stares, whispered questions. 2 days later, Camp Thatcher held a modest ceremony on the parade field. No marching band, no media, just rows of cadets in formation and a simple plaque presented by the base commander. Camille stood still as applause swelled. She nodded once, gracious, composed, but something inside her remained tightly wound, like a wire waiting to snap. Later that afternoon, down in Ashfield, the police station was quieter than usual. The buzz surrounding Camille's trial had mostly faded, at least publicly. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Lieutenant Frank Shearer, a 30-year veteran with a weathered jaw and sleeves rolled high, stood in the briefing room watching her testimony replay on a grainy monitor. "This is what they call justice now?" he muttered. "She humiliated one of our own, and they clapped." His tone was less angry than it was cold, methodical. She turned that courtroom into a soapbox. Around him, younger officers nodded carefully. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room already knew he wasn't letting this go. That evening, a sealed envelope made its way up the chain, sent anonymously to the Department of Defense. It accused Lieutenant Colonel Camille Jordan of misconduct, of weaponizing her rank and image to slander law enforcement under the guise of justice. Camille didn't know it yet, but her verdict had done more than make headlines. It had disturbed something deeper, something that didn't forget, something that had just begun to move. The summons came in a sealed manila envelope, marked confidential, immediate. Camille opened it at her desk, her breath catching halfway through the first paragraph. It wasn't about her court testimony or the media storm that followed. It was something darker, more calculated. She had been called to Washington for a closed-door hearing with the Subcommittee on Military Conduct. No cameras, no public record, just questions and the weight of suspicion. By the time she landed at Reagan National, Mara Quinn was already waiting. The attorney's usual calm had been replaced with something harder, sharper. "This isn't about oversight," she said as they sat in the back of a government car. "This is a coordinated strike. They're not just trying to delay the legislation. We're looking at a full-blown smear campaign. They want your credibility gutted before the bill even hits committee." Camille didn't flinch, but inside her stomach tightened. At Camp Thatcher, teaching cadets had been her rhythm, her grounding. Now, the Army had quietly reassigned her from her command role, pending review, a move that stung deeper than she admitted. The plaque in her office drawer felt like a souvenir from a job she might no longer hold. The hearing room was small, sterile, just 5 officers in uniform behind a polished table, their eyes unreadable. Camille answered their questions with precision, never raising her voice, never losing control. But every answer felt like walking a tightrope in a wind tunnel. Outside, Mara dug deeper. What she found chilled her. Mace, the disgraced officer from the trial, hadn't filed the complaint. His name didn't even appear on the internal memo. Instead, it led to someone else. Chief Alton Granger. The same man who had testified in Camille's favor during the civil suit. The same man now revealed to have long-standing ties with a regional police union notorious for burying misconduct cases. Mara closed the file slowly, her voice low. He stood with you in court because he was trying to cover his own tracks? Camille stared ahead, jaw tight. A betrayal wrapped in applause. The game had changed, and this time, it wouldn't be played in the open. The deeper they dug, the darker it got. Camille and Mara sat shoulder to shoulder in a dim conference room above an independent law office in Louisville, files spread out across the table like pieces of a crime scene. Police reports, internal reviews, misconduct complaints, all dismissed or quietly buried. And one detail stood out in bold, bitter ink. Most of the victims were black service members in uniform, stopped while off duty, accused of nothing, and offered no recourse. It's not just you, Mara muttered, flipping through a manila folder. This is systemic, and someone's been keeping it that way. Camille stared at the names. Sergeant Linda Rowe, Captain Jalen Mays, Corporal Xavier Boone. Each one carried the same pattern: wrongful stops, excessive force, no disciplinary action. The same precinct names popped up again and again, the same signatures, the same silence. Then came a name neither of them expected. Isaac Duvall, a former internal affairs officer who vanished from the force 6 years ago, following a sudden medical leave. Rumors said he had a breakdown. The truth was harder to find. They located him living off-grid in a trailer deep in Kentucky backwoods, 2 hours from the nearest town. Camille didn't bring anyone. No escorts, no rank, just a gray hoodie, an unmarked car, and quiet resolve. Duvall opened the door slow, eyes wary but sharp. When she said her name, he didn't flinch. I figured you'd come eventually, he said, voice rough with time. I kept it, all of it. Inside, he handed her a battered hard drive. No introductions, no small talk. Just a flicker of guilt in his eyes as the screen lit up. It was a grainy recording of a closed-door meeting at the Ashfield precinct. Granger, flanked by 4 senior officers, discussing how to filter the narrative and preempt damaging media angles tied to Camille's case. They even debated planting older complaints tied to her past deployments. But what dropped like a hammer was the final clip, audio from 12 years earlier. Granger dismissing an eerily similar civil rights case, calling the victim a loose end no one would remember. Camille wasn't the first, she was just the first they couldn't shut up. It didn't take long for the tide to turn. What started as subtle whispers online became headlines overnight. Lieutenant Colonel or Master Manipulator. Camille Jordan, hero or headline chaser. Cable pundits dissected her expressions. One viral clip slowed down her courtroom entrance, claiming her walk was too calculated to be innocent. Camille sat on the edge of her bed at Camp Thatcher. TV muted, eyes fixed on the scrolling ticker below the news anchor's grin. She didn't recognize the world anymore. Not the one outside, not the one inside her own mind. The next blow hit harder. An anonymous account posted a clipped audio file, supposedly leaked from a private call between Camille and Mara. The voices were theirs, but the words were sliced and rearranged, spun into something bitter and damning. It sounded like Camille was bragging about taking down the badge from the inside. The army responded within hours. Until a formal investigation was complete, Camille would be relieved of her command, effective immediately. Her quarters were cleared by noon. Across the country, Bradley Mace appeared on national television, this time clean-shaven, suit-pressed, a new legal team flanking him. His voice trembled just enough to sound wounded. "I've served my community with honor for 15 years, he told the anchor. I made mistakes, but I was publicly destroyed by someone who knew exactly how to use a uniform for power." The host nodded somberly. "A symbol weaponized," she echoed. The clip went viral. Mara slammed her laptop shut. "They're playing it perfectly," she muttered. "They're flipping the narrative. You're no longer the victim, Camille. You're the threat." Camille said nothing. She stared out the window of Mara's office as rain traced lines across the glass. Inside her, a silence grew. Not the steady kind that helped her through deployments or trial prep, but the gnawing kind that made you question the ground you stood on. What if they're right? She finally whispered. What if I'm just making it worse? Mara froze. You're not... Camille looked away, but doubt had already found a home, and it wasn't leaving quietly. The silence didn't last. Mara didn't let it. For 48 hours she barely slept, digging through metadata, IP trails, contract records. And when the thread finally unraveled, it led straight to a private security firm in Georgia. The same firm recently paid, discreetly, but traceably, by the Ashfield Police Benevolent Association. Their specialty? Digital ops, media shaping, and narrative stabilization. The leaked audio wasn't leaked at all, it was engineered. Mara brought in a forensic audio expert, and with Isaac Duvall's original files, the truth snapped into place. Time codes didn't match. Waveforms were spliced. A full report was filed within a day, and federal eyes opened fast. Too many patterns. Too many names. Too many threads leading back to Granger. A special hearing was called in D.C., closed to the public but crawling with military brass, federal observers, and the ghosts of a dozen careers on the line. Camille stood once again in uniform, not restored, not vindicated, but anchored. Her eyes didn't wander. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low, calm, and deliberate. I didn't come here to punish a man, she said. I came to expose a system. Granger sat stone-faced across the aisle, flanked by counsel. The panel asked if she had anything to add before closing remarks. Camille didn't reach for a folder or flash a chart. Instead, she unfolded a worn piece of paper and began to read. Dear Lieutenant Colonel Jordan, she began. You don't know me. I'm 16, my brother's in the Army, and he says you're the bravest person he's never met. I don't know what they're saying about you, but I saw how you stood in court. I saw your face. If you stop now, there won't be anyone left to teach us how to stand straight. Her voice caught just slightly. The room didn't blink. I'm still standing, she said, folding the letter slowly, because someone's watching. Someone always is. A hush followed, not silence, something heavier. The committee adjourned, but this time Camille didn't walk out, questioning herself. She walked out ready. The verdict wasn't read from a bench, but it landed just the same. A final recommendation from the federal committee. Advance the Jordan Act. A new bill designed to protect active-duty military personnel from civil abuse by local law enforcement. It wasn't just policy. It was a line in the sand. Chief Alton Granger was officially removed from his position within 72 hours. The officers who had joined his scheme were placed under internal review, several stripped of rank. The Ashfield precinct went silent for a while. No press statements, no denials. Just a town trying to breathe through its reckoning. Camille didn't celebrate. She didn't return to the parade fields of Camp Thatcher or reclaim the command she had once called home. Instead, she stepped into something larger, appointed as Director of Military Ethics for the entire Eastern Command. Not a desk job, a platform. Weeks later, she stood at the front of a new classroom in Maryland, rows of fresh uniforms staring back at her. The air smelled of starch and nerves. She walked slowly, hands clasped behind her back, letting the silence hold a moment longer than expected. From the second row, a young black cadet raised her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. Ma'am, what if you speak up and no one believes you? What if they just look away? Camille turned, eyes steady. She walked over, placed a hand gently on the cadet's shoulder, and said, Then you keep your spine straight. You write it down, you make it undeniable. You finish the story they're afraid to read. The girl didn't speak again, but her posture changed, shoulders back, chin lifted. Outside the building, the same black SUV waited by the curb. No cameras, no headlines, no fury in the rear view. Just morning light stretching across the pavement like a promise. Camille stepped in, closed the door behind her, and looked ahead. Not with anger, but resolve. Because silence, she'd learned, isn't weakness. It's fuel. And this time, it would drive something further than fire. It would carry change. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the loudest ones. They're the quiet battles fought behind closed doors, where truth doesn't shout. It holds the line, where silence isn't surrender, but strength waiting for the right moment to rise. Justice isn't always about the verdict. It's about the courage to stand when standing costs you something. And honor, it's not given, it's proven. Over time, through storms, when no one is watching. In a world quick to forget, stories like this remind us why memory matters, why truth, no matter how buried, still finds its way to light. If this story stirred something in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, share your take, and don't forget to follow for more stories that dig deeper than headlines. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for staying with us, even in the quiet.